Well, thank you all for joining this podcast on Institute for Greatness. Today we have two incredible guests, Eric Ho and Zachary Lee, who are founders of GenCap. And maybe before we start this formally, I just want to give all of you a quick background on how I got to know them. I got to know them a little over a year ago when they started their journey. And I was introduced to them through one of the VCs that I invested, one of the GPs, and they spoke very highly of Eric and Zach. And so along the way, we got to know each other, and I would love for you guys to, great that you guys are on this show so we can share a little bit about your journey. So to get started, I just want to know that you guys are working on a search fund called GenCap, right? So what is a search fund? Let's start with Zach or Eric.
Yeah, maybe I'll take this. Thank you, Anthony, for the questions. Just to kick off with the clarification on the terminology. Generally, a search fund is a very specific investment vehicle where an entrepreneur raises a pot of capital upfront to search, to acquire, and to operate a single company. It is typically quite structured and with a very fixed timeline. Typically about 2 years to find a deals, where investors tend to get a preferred returns, and the entrepreneur then become the CEO to lead, modernize, and professionalize the service. So that's essentially the concept and the terminology of a search fund.
Great. Okay, thank you for that very simple explanation, because we also often hear the word ETA, which is the acronym for Entrepreneurship Through Acquisition. Mm-hmm. Is it fair to use these search fund and ETA interchangeably? Or if you can share, what are the nuances between these two?
Thank you, Anthony. ETA, short for Entrepreneurship Through Acquisition, is a much broader concept. It basically means that there is an alternative pathway towards business ownership rather than starting from the beginning, like a venture, for example. And within the ETA group, there are many ways that you can go about acquiring businesses. Search fund is one of the way where you raise capital upfront and you acquire it. There are also other types. For example, you can self-fund your acquisition, right? So for example, you have made some money, you can buy a business yourself. Right? That's not called a search fund, but it falls within the umbrella of an ETA. And there are also other structures in place. Things like, holding companies, family offices. As long as you acquire a business to be an owner, that would consider as within the umbrella of an ETA. And the ETA itself falls under the broader umbrella called private equity, right? Because this is basically one of the ways that we acquire businesses, but generally an ETA focuses on what we call micro to small cap buyout.
Okay, and is there a kind of a certain size of check size that makes it fall into a search, or it's more about just the format of a deal will make it fall into a search fund?
Yeah, great question. Generally, what we typically see is that the checks that in terms of the execution size is within 5 to 30 million US dollar. I think that will falls under the general kind of concept of an ETA. But we have seen also more experienced operator executing a transaction that is in the range of 50 million US dollar. But that is more rare than I would say a norm.
Okay, and this 5 to 30, that's for global, or is that more for certain regions?
Yeah, globally, this is what we typically see. I think in Asia, we are more tilted towards the smaller size. Mainly it's because we are still not as mature as what we see in the Western market. But in the US, generally, the range is within 5 to 30 million in terms of the enterprise value.
Okay, great. So thank you for giving the audience a high-level overview and a very simple definition of what a search fund and ETA is. Now I want to delve a little bit deeper into the two of you, which is, how did you both get interested in search fund?
Cool. Maybe I'll take this, Anthony. And again, thanks again for having us. So I'm going to tell a little bit of my personal story, and then I'll leave Zach to speak about his. Right. So for myself, I spent a decade largely running operations across three tech startups in Southeast Asia. Right. The first being in payments, second one being in advertising, the last one being in Web3. Right. So help raise upwards of $10 million collectively. Even had one successful exit to a European MNC. So, but what I saw in that 10 years journey was that a lot of these VCs were pouring like billions into these moonshot ideas, right? And in that process, they burn cash. And on the other hand, I think what we are kind of alluding to in today's topic was there's thousands of profitable SMEs here, businesses generating real cash flows for decades, and we're completely ignored, I think, because they were boring, right? They don't have that shiny thing that comes with startups. So just rewinding back a little bit, I think that my breaking point was my last startup. I think we worked so hard at it, but between a lot of different factors, we struggled to raise another round of funding at the end of the day. I think that taught me anything more than any success. Like it made me question like why were we spending good capital, good time, like building, trying to build from zero, right? When there were actually proven businesses with customers and that kind of like key magic phrase, product market fit already, with operations already humming along. So early 2024, when I exited my last startup, I spoke to quite a few advisors, past investors. Then each and every one of them told me to study this search fund slash ETA model, right? So immediately quick, like why not just acquire something that's already working, like great cash flow, profitable, and just apply like further operational excellence to scale it, right? So that's my story. Maybe I let Zach to kind of like just share his realization as well through his lens.
Thank you, Eric. I come from more of an investment management perspective. Prior to starting GenCap, I spent about 8 years in private equity and venture capital. I've evaluated easily over 1,000 businesses across Southeast Asia and deployed more than 200 million of capital. I saw this playbook in terms of investing in private businesses work brilliantly for large companies where they buy, optimize, and exit. But I kept saying this kind of a massive gap. PE funds, they tend to focus on businesses doing above 50 million in revenue because that's where they can deploy very meaningful capital and put it at work. They have large overheads. They employ very expensive associates and they do have a big office. And that's why for them to make their money worth it, they got to really deploy in large deals, all right, because of their portfolio construction. Meanwhile, there are tens of thousands of profitable SMEs doing around in 10 to 20 million in revenue range. Then nobody's really kind of looking at it. Nobody's really touching. They are typically too small for private equity funds, and at the same time, they are too boring for VCs, right? Because they don't really like grow at two times or three times on a year-on-year basis. And so when Eric and I we were reconnected early last year, we realized that we had these complementary skill sets for this to address this exact gap. So I come from investment management, so I understand a lot more on deal making and structuring, whereas Eric understood operations, team building, scaling, marketing, for example. And we both saw the same opportunity from the completely different vantage points. And that's when we knew that perhaps we need to really take a deeper look into this SME acquisition space and to build GenCap together. Back then, when we connected, we didn't even know this term called a search funds, but it was really through a lot more research, speaking to other investment professionals, speaking to other operators as well, and we realized that there's this structure and a framework that we could use to acquire SMEs and basically operate it. And the timing also couldn't be better, right? Because at that time, we do see that there's a venture capital and startups are starting to consolidate, and many of them are thinking sort of what else to do, and potentially an ETA slash search funds could be a very interesting kind of a place to begin with.
Wow, great. Thank you for sharing that background. So, and you touched on something I want to ask, which is exactly how did you guys choose each other as business partners? I know you talked about you guys reconnected and there's the complementary skill set, right? But at the end of the day is you guys are building a business together for the long term. And as somebody who's founded two companies, I really do think that finding that partner for business really is kind of like getting married in many ways. So yeah, if you guys don't mind sharing, besides the complementary skill set, kind of maybe who thought of this first? Was it one night over a drink and then because of alcohol, like, hey, let's start a business together type? But yeah.
Okay, I'll take this. I'm just going to add a little bit of color to that question, right? So, kind of like the whole genesis of it all. So, back in 2017, Zach and I initially met through actually an introduction from one of my best friends. He and Zach were colleagues at Procter& Gamble. I think I was then for my second startup in advertising, looking for a country manager in Indonesia. I think Zach also at that point about to or had already just graduated from INSEAD. So unfortunately, for me, I landed with a local person because I really needed somebody to work the ground in Indonesia. And Zach went for a much better esteemed employer, the government of Singapore. Right? I'll leave that story to Zach to tell. So, but regardless, I think we kept in touch a couple of times yearly, and then serendipitously, then when we met again early last year, I started pitching about ETA to him, and he pitched the same thing to me, right? So that, hey, we have kind of like very different lenses of how we want to approach ETA. I like hands up, at that point didn't really know how to structure what's this a deal. Zach obviously knows that, so kind of like that was super complementary from a skill set perspective. So I've always enjoyed the conversations whenever we caught up. So this was someone that you could really tell. I think Anthony, you probably sees that too. Someone who is Zach is full of tenacity, right? And not just like pure blind tenacity, it's just fronted by intelligence as well. So, but most importantly, notwithstanding the successes that we want to derive out of our efforts, I think from a values perspective, it needs to be very key. So we do have one common thing that's personally for me cannot be compromised. Not about to swear in this podcast, but there's a no A whole rule, right? So I think life is short. We need to choose wisely, like who we associate with. So I think that's like super important for us. So Zach, I'll leave you to share your story.
No, thank you, Eric. I think very similar to what Eric has also shared. And more importantly, we knew each other for a while. We have kind of a common background. Both of us originally were from Malaysia, came to Singapore for education, and so I think we do really could empathize the kind of a journey that we went through. I think very important for me. It is really crucial to have fun throughout the journey, right? And partnering with somebody that you're comfortable to share the ups and downs with, finding a very mission aligned person and get somebody with complementary skill sets are all really critical. And I think importantly, we are also at a stage last year where we wanted to do something different, right, from the traditional venture capital and the startup space, because Ari has been there for 10 years. I've been there for almost 8 years. So I guess the timing, the character, and the skill set all made a lot of sense for us. And I think since we started, I think the division of labor has been quite clear, right? Everything investments or M&A related comes to me, and everything that is operational related will goes to Eric, right? So because we actually play to both our strengths very well, we respect each other's expertise, right, in our clear area. So I think it's always very easy to defer things between both of us.
Okay. Thank you for that. Yeah, thanks for sharing the details kind of behind the scenes of how you get together, because I think this is a topic a lot of businessmen or a lot of entrepreneurs think about, right? It's because sometimes they look at things on paper and just say, oh, complementary skill set, they'll just work together well. But I think, as we know, and then we can talk about this later, when you pick entrepreneurs for your portfolio companies, it's also not as simple as that, right? Just looking at somebody on a piece of paper. So on this point, now that you guys are partners and entrepreneurs, can you share with us some of the lowlights and some of the highlights of your journey so far? Who wants to take the low light part? That's always the fun one. Talk about the low lights, not the highlights. Everybody wants to share the highlights, right?
Maybe I'll do the low lights. Zach, you can do the highlights, right? So I'm going to obviously take a lot of this what I'm going to about to share specifically to Gen Cap on this front, right? Seeing to be an entrepreneur, I think you need to be a little bit crazy. So your heart really needs to be strong enough to take that multiple heart attacks, right? So there are a couple of points here for me. I think one is the ability to deal with the uncertainty, right? There have been days where anything that could have gone wrong has gone wrong, right? So I think, for example, just a deal that I saw the team like putting so much effort in, but just lost it due to some personal differences with the seller. I'm not able to share a little bit more than that due to confidentiality, but kind of like that was very emotional to every one of us, right? And then most recently, I think there was one time when one of our potential investors like decided to just back out, like just with just 2 weeks left to close the investment round. And this is despite like everything seemingly well, right, up until the 11th hour. Like we've been going out for drinks, like lunch, like nobody could have predicted like there was that change of mind, but it happened, right? So you definitely need to have that steel in you to compartmentalize and then like persevere despite this setbacks. So I think what's great is that I have, and I strongly encourage to all entrepreneurs out there to have a great support system. And I have this with obviously my co-founder, my close friends, set of advisors, informally, formally, and many of whom also are entrepreneurs, and also my own life partner. I think the next point that I just want to share really quickly is like really the ability to deal with the unknown. I think being an entrepreneur from a definition point of view generally means that you're creating a path, right? A new path, be it for yourself, your stakeholders, the ecosystem, the product, so on and so forth. I think what this means is I think the future admittedly is fuzzy, right? So without a clear vision of what you want to do, of things you want to come, whether it's going to pan out or not, like you need to be kind of like clear towards that path, right? So your precious efforts, time slips by really quickly if you don't have that clarity. I think for me and Zach, I think we communicate a lot, mostly on WhatsApp, because we are kind of like a distance apart these days. Calls minimally once a week, but we have a lot more than that. And we do plan quite a bit, lah, because I think we're a little bit more seasoned in this. So we do have like systems like OKRs, we track things very critically on Airtable and so on and so forth. That's the good side. Zach, you want to speak about the great stuff that has happened? Yeah.
Thank you, Eric, for giving me the easier ones, right? I think Anthony, right, the very important thing is that we always advocate on really working with the right people, just working with good people, right, in our ecosystem. And I think the journey so far has been really rewarding. We met a lot of folks along the way who has been so supportive and encouraging. So we met operators who really want to really roll up the sleeve and to execute. And so far, we have been able to consummate transactions to really get operators in place and coming out with the GenCap model in life, right? We saw this model that we designed and really executed and put into transaction. I think Anthony, we engaged, right, since the very beginning. We educated you on the model, and you have seen how it actually came into life, right? I think this one is something that we feel a very great sense of achievement, working alongside great people and bringing them along as we executed the essentially our model. So what now? I think the idea is how do we then scale this, right? And essentially it's really a kind of a flywheel effect where we continue to work with different sort of high quality, high caliber operators. We bring high quality deals onto the table with reasonable valuations that our investors can come in and evaluate and execute and essentially back some of these deals. So I think there's a lot of this fulfillment in terms of what we are trying to achieve. And I do think that we are at a place whereby we need to start to execute well and scale up our model.
Yeah, sounds exciting. I think in merely about like a year and a half or so, I mean, you guys have made a lot of progress, right, to get to where you are today. On the point that,
Thank you.
yeah, on a point that Eric mentioned earlier about clarity and uncertainty, I mean, this is a term that shows up a lot in a lot of conversations now, right? Especially, not just about just geopolitics, but rise of technology and displacing a lot of people, right? So this is something that's commonly surfaces in conversations. for you guys, when you think about uncertainty and how you said, oh, you need to kind of pave a path for clarity, right? How do you do it? Like, how do you think about what's in your control and what's not in your control to really craft out this clarity for the business?
Yeah, so I'll touch on this on maybe like two aspects first, right? I think one, between Zach and me as founders of the business, I think what we've have has aligned, and this has never changed, is we think we know actually the model, and there's a problem to be solved, right? Whether we are doing it the right way, the GenCap model right now, that I think it's fuzzy, but there's a end goal that I think it's super clear for the both of us. Right, so I think that to me is the key thinking behind how we operate. For me as well, and I'm taking past experiences running startups for the past 10 years and now bringing that into GenCap. Crystal balling is great for ambition, but what we need to do is what are the futures that we can actually control, and this how we see it is on a quarterly basis. So for this quarter, we spent very intensely just one full day just trashing out what have went well in the past quarter and what will go on in the future quarter, and just plan methodologically what I want to achieve with key KPIs. Whether we hit it or not, I think that's a separate discussion, but at least this is the effort that we have agreed to partake on for the next 3 months, and we've just focused, right? We don't sway from what we've committed from that. So that is on a structural perspective. I think then coming back to my previous point in your previous question as well, we are all human. So sometimes when we do doubt ourselves or we have lingering questions, then go back to your support system, go back to each other, me and Zach, just talk it through, and just be transparent about it. This mode of communication, I think it cannot be compromised. I think once we have some questions in our heads, just talk openly about it and discuss on how we can solve it. So I'll just pause there, and then if Zach has anything to add.
No, thank you, Eric. So Anthony, I think those are great questions, and I'm glad that you asked. I think to frame it in the context of the deal, I do think that in every deal that we pursue, we certainly will face a lot of uncertainty, right? In terms of what happens right after we acquire and after we done a transaction. I think first and foremost, our first line of defense has always been, we ask ourselves, do we have sufficient margin of safety, right, in that we price into the valuation? And that means that on a base case scenario, if we don't do anything to the business and we continue to to maintain itself, can we get back our money in 4 to 5 years time? Right, that's our base case. If the answer is no, then there's no sufficient margin of safety. We should not do the deal. Right, and then the question is that what are some of the levers that we can pull to bring the business up 20% a year, 10%, 20% a year, and what does that scenario looks like? For example, and we do a little bit of scenario analysis to test out a little bit of model. We also ask ourselves what potentially could kill the deal, right? Things like that. So that's one, right? Ensuring that after we run this analysis, there's sufficient margin of safety that we realize that we could go ahead and move forward with that. And second thing is that and the other thing I also learned about is that we do not have to be afraid to walk away from a deal. And I know that there's also a strong sense of sunk cost fallacy, right? After we spend, for example, many months, right, courtship, courting the business, etc., and we found out that there is so much uncertainty that we do not know how to move ahead. And I think it's time sometimes to say that sorry, we are not the right party for you because we do not know how to underwrite this sort of future. And for us, it has happened before, right? Back then, when we were looking into a food processing business, 40% of that business is actually serving the US customer, exporting to US customers. Back then, when Trump actually issued a tariff, that was I think a 32% tariff on one of the markets that we export from. It was a direct hit, right? Basically, it means that our price would go up by 32%. We couldn't underwrite that sort of future, right? Because we didn't know what would happen, right? And it has not happened before. There's no kind of a precedence. We decided not to do the deal because it was just so uncertain. And so far, I thought the tariff went okay, but at that time when we were to make the decision, we really couldn't underwrite. So we thought, okay, let's just let's just err on the right side, right? We make mistakes on the right side. Let's not go ahead to take the risk, right? Especially we are so early in our career in Gen career. I hope that makes sense for you, Anthony.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. It sounds that a few things I took away from this is you stick to your model. There's a problem to be solved, right? And that never changes, despite all the uncertainty. Also, the fact that it's okay to walk away because that is within your control, right? And that's how you deal with uncertainty. Okay, so that's very useful, and I think what you highlighted, being structural and focusing on that is extremely important. Yeah, going regardless of where you are in the cycle. So the next thing I want to ask is, in terms of search fund, what are some of the key trends you're seeing globally and in this region of Southeast Asia that you focus on? Because search fund is not a new concept, right? It's been around for actually a long time, especially in more advanced markets like the US. So yeah, if you can share with us kind of the key maybe similarities and differences and what makes this part of the world unique.
Oh, thank you, Anthony, for that question. We actually just hosted an event last Friday on this exact same topic to talk about the trends. The name of the event is called Buy and Build: An Introduction to Search Funds and ETA. We did it in the Asia School of Business in KL, and the response validated everything we have been seeing on the ground. The first trend that we're seeing is that the urgency in Malaysia is undeniable. There's actually facts to back up this statement that by 2030, and that's only 5 years away, Malaysia will officially be an aging society with 5.8 million people over the year of 60. And this is not theoretical forecast, right? It's actually happening right now. And for us, we are calling it a silver tsunami. So what this means is that by from now to 2030, from now onwards, there'll be a predictable wave of SME owners who will be retiring. Okay, so there'll be kind of a supply of businesses that's upcoming. And what makes this particularly acute is that it's also compounded with the brain drain problem in Malaysia, right? Where we see second and third generation family members. They are not just interested in taking over the business, and many of them are building careers outside of Malaysia. They're building their lives and careers outside of Malaysia. So many of Malaysians are in US, are in Australia and Singapore, where they're working for MNCs, right? They're pursuing a completely different path. They have their children and their family outside already, right? So they're not just ready to go back to Malaysia. And so you have these profitable businesses that are, with a track record of 20, 30 years that's coming into the market, and you're also facing a leadership vacuum at the top. Okay. And here's what makes Malaysia so different is that these businesses, they are healthy businesses. They don't need turnarounds, right? They are deeply entrenched in the communities with sticky revenues, healthy margins, and very high quality cash flows. And essentially, they are really the backdrop of the Malaysian economy. And again, it falls under the definition of being too small for private equity funds and too boring for VCs that we spoke about earlier. And so we believe that, with this supply coming up, we are in a very good position to really address this opportunity. I think we are finding a lot of value where the institutional capital are not looking, and partnering with these sellers who care about their legacy and stewardship as much as they care about the price. We are also seeing another tailwind, very important tailwind, is that the capital accessibility is improving in this part of the world, right? Private equity has traditionally been having a good track record in Malaysia, right, with good PE firms like Nebis Capital and Creator, right? So there are many investors who are looking to access private equity deals currently. And next, we also see that private credit is emerging, and these serve as a source of debt capital that we can go in to finance our acquisitions. We are also seeing that more and more family offices are waking up with SME investments as an asset class. When we speak with family offices, we often heard that the public equity market, especially in the US, is overvalued right now, and many of them are taking some capital, right, from the market and looking to deploy into stable businesses with quality cash flow. And so those are some of the trends we are seeing, and that we are starting to see more and more movement into the SME acquisition or slash buyout space. Henry, you want to
Got
talk
it.
about the operator side on some of the trends that we are seeing?
Yeah, cool. Thanks so much, Zach. So yeah, on the talent front perspective, right, I think we've been working the ground, trying to get really good operating talent, hosting events, hosting boot camps, hosting master classes. I think there is something I think when we started, Zach and I started, we thought of all the three pillars that we look at GenCap. We thought talent would be the most difficult to come by, given that this is a new concept, but we've been proven wrong many times, right? So this folks that show up for these events or reach out to us or us them, is high caliber, extremely high caliber and high interest, right? So, for example, Malcolm Wong, just for the record, he's not associated with GenCap. He's running his own efforts through his holding company called M3I. He's someone who left BCG, Temasek, those really high-paying jobs, right, to go hands-on with struggling SMEs, right? So he went and joined a struggling SME for very little money just to get their trust, and then thereafter then did a buyout with them, right? So he's also building an operating council, fractional experts in finance, marketing, digitalization. So one of his side companies even does like $300,000-$400,000 in monthly revenue with just 3 marketeers, because he's really like systemizing everything, right? So I think case in point that there's really good operating talent here. So I think that's on the talent side. What I'm seeing also here in Singapore is that there is a sophistication developing, right, on all fronts. So on the buy side, folks are actually reading up very, very much already on how the US playbook is, right? Because there's so much literature out there, like fantastic work, right? So, but there are some nuances that have been adopted by the buy side here in Singapore, and also I'm sure in Malaysia. So just Malcolm, coming back to him again, fantastic guy, like does physical due diligence. Like he's literally just stands outside of a shop that he wants to buy or sends interns, etc. Counts the van that's leaving the warehouse, right? Because you can really manipulate financials, but I think not on physical activity. So I think really being on the ground, seeing that is something that you need to do in Southeast Asia. In Singapore, and obviously Singapore, Southeast Asia as well, super important you establish trust, I think, before asking for financial numbers or the LOI. On the sell side, I think there's a sophistication that's increasing as well. I think when we first started, I think the sellers' valuation were extremely arbitrary. Just that one thing, that $10 million, because it's something I want to retire with, or how much investments they've sunk into the business and the added premium. I think a lot of the conversations these days have now started from, oh, I want 8 times, 9 times EBITDA. So I think at least from a standardization of thinking, it's common, right? Then we start negotiating based on that. And just to echo what Zach has mentioned, succession crisis here is equally acute as compared to Malaysia, right? So what this means also in Singapore, there's a opportunity to do the operational arbitrage, like the alpha, because a lot of the founders here that we've walked into, like highly profitable companies, still using paper ledgers, like not believing in outbound sales, for example, not because they're unsophisticated, but really more of these founders are really in a mental limbo of how much efforts I need to change and evolve, only because in their mind, am I going to be around much longer with the business, right? So I think we have the perfect storm with us right now. Like we have a motivated seller. We have a great operator pool coming in, as well as capital. I think there's capital is fully aligned now. So that's something that I think GenCap we are seeing, and the ecosystem that we want to build.
Yeah, that sounds really exciting because yeah, I hear the word say mental limbo, perfect storm, and a lot of people say, yeah, these are not good, but it depends on how you look at it, right? It's because of this perfect storm that presents opportunities, right? It's because of the mental limbo that gives you that opportunity to generate upside for your investments. And then just one other question I'm sure a lot of the listeners here want to know is, what really is the key difference between an employee and entrepreneur? Because I'm sure This is probably a question you get a lot from some of the operators you're trying to recruit, right? Because a lot of these people have very comfortable jobs, steady paycheck. Why would I want to take this risk and become an entrepreneur?
Now, thanks so much, Anthony. I think the biggest difference here is that you own the process and you own the outcome, right? It's about really that ownership. You do a good deal, you take all the credit and you take all the economics. Simple as that. You do a bad deal, you lose money and you lose your time. There is nobody for you to blame, right? The buck stop with you. Also, there is, when you sometimes when you're an employee, right, there's this term called like you got to wayang, right? Which is basically you need to do a lot of show and tell to your stakeholders, and that this kind of show and tell takes a lot of time. Show that you're busy, right? Show that you go back at 9, 10 p.m. for example. But when you own the business, when you have ownership, these things doesn't really matter, right? In fact, the deal and the outcome speak for themselves. I've always told our search partners that you only have one job. Your one job is to find high quality deals at reasonable valuation. Doesn't really matter how you do it, right? Doesn't really, you want to cold call, you want to reach out to brokers, you want to just, stop the sellers. It's up to you, right? You define the process, you own the process, you own the outcome. Okay. As for our operators, the North Star is how do we build the best company that you can build in your industry, right? That is really your North Star. You have one job. And of course, there's certain financial and operating metrics as the guidepost to show that we are on the way to building the great business. But it's just to have that kind of a North Star for both the searchers and the operators. And our goals and incentives are aligned with our shareholders. Ultimately, we are in the driving seat and we need to own that result. Hence, I believe that the biggest and the most ultimate difference between an employee versus an entrepreneur is the ownership, right? We own something. We don't just own the company, but we also own the process and we own the outcome.
Eric, is there anything you want to share in terms of the operators you've met?
I think all that Zach has added, I'll just share additional color specifically to entrepreneurship through acquisition. I think the difference is two parts here. One is the entrepreneurs in this ETA are generally folks that are slightly older, if I may. Was this because you're taking a business that has already have existing operations? So typically these are coming out from fresh graduates from schools are a little bit too kind of like too young for this, right? So I think with that age, was this a entry point as well? It comes different kind of consideration personally, right? So we've been asked a lot of questions like, hey, then if I'm going to start something, what are my finances? I think this is where I think ETA comes in as a benefit, because you're buying a business already with operating cash flow, of which you can get a salary like close to the market, right? You won't get the great packages like what a big MNC gives you, but more than decent enough to run a life, support your family in Singapore. I think that it kind of like from a risk reward perspective, it's in the middle between starting from zero and sticking to being an employee in a big company. Yeah.
So Anthony, you're also right. Then it's not for everyone, right? It's and we have definitely spoken to operators who still want that kind of a stable monthly paycheck, and that is fine. That is fine. I think for the line of questionings in the first 5 questions, you probably can know whether they are suitable or not, right? It's also about that humility. It is also about that ability to take risks, to go through a period of uncertainty. We get that because Eric and I, we were also employees in the past, but the reason why we shift to this because we find it really rewarding and very satisfying. Right. At the end of the day, an employee, you can only do it to certain age, and after a while, you need to sort of start to own a business for you to make an impact on the local community and the society around you.
No, thank you for that. I can totally resonate with this, right? Because we all met, and because we're all entrepreneurs, part of our journey, we're also employees, right? So I do appreciate how you highlighted your perspective on difference between employee and entrepreneur, and how Eric actually highlighted that, yeah, ETA is actually a tremendous opportunity to kind of bridge that gap between not completely being an entrepreneur on day one, like the traditional, I'm just going to give up everything and then start something from scratch. I have no clue what may happen. Whereas now you kind of start off with a hybrid of both, right? So it does sound like a tremendous opportunity. I do like what Zach said at the end is, at the end you're an employee for many years, but at the end you still don't have that full sense of ownership, which, as you said, maybe some people don't attribute as much value to, right? But I mean, for me also, as I coach people who are older, more senior, say 45, 50 years old and up, this is actually a topic that comes up a lot is, I've been working for 3 decades or 25 years and I still feel something is lacking. And a lot of it is that sense of ownership that you talked about. Great. So really appreciate all of the insights. Before we wrap up, because it's all the time we have today, it's a lot of very very valuable insights you've shared with us. Where can we find you? Because you guys have a website, LinkedIn, you have newsletter. Like, what is the best place?
Cool. LinkedIn today is the best. So look us up, follow us. We publish weekly there, and we're always monitoring our inbox. So look for Gen Capital Partners, follow us, and our website is brewing. So that has been a little late, but hopefully we can announce something soon. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate all of the time that you have shared with us. I'm sure our audience has been wowed by all of your insights. And best of luck with your journey. It's been incredible. And I'm sure, compared to a lot of people who were in your shoes a year ago, you guys have been way ahead of the pack. And I want to congratulate you guys for all that.
Really kind of you. Thanks, Anthony. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for your kind
Great.
words.
Great. Thank you all. So,
Thanks.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode with Gen Cap, with Eric Ho and Zachary Lee. We'll see you next time. Bye.